Imagine a queen so fearless. She walked into a room of European colonizers and demanded to be treated as an equal. A leader so brilliant, she spent 40 years outsmarting the most powerful military commanders of her time. And a woman so defiant that when the Portuguese governor refused her a chair, forcing her to stand, she had her servant get on all fours to become her human throne. She made it crystal clear no one would ever look down on her. This isn't a fantasy movie. This is the incredible, true story of Queen Nzinga of Ndongo. In the 17th century, she became a symbol of resistance, a master military strategist, and the absolute nightmare of Portuguese colonial ambitions in Central Africa. For 4 long decades, she waged a relentless guerrilla war against one of the most formidable empires in Europe. Think about that. 40 years. She wasn't just hiding in the background. She was on the front lines, leading her armies into battle, forging clever alliances with rival kingdoms and even the Dutch. She was a master of diplomacy and a genius on the battlefield. When the Portuguese tried to capture her people, she fought back. When they tried to break her spirit, she grew stronger. Even when her kingdom was on the verge of collapse and all seemed lost, Nzinga refused to surrender. She adapted, she strategized, and she fought on, becoming a beacon of hope for her people and a legend of African resistance. Her story is one that has often been overlooked or intentionally erased from mainstream history books, but her legacy is a powerful reminder that one person's courage can change the course of history. She proved that no matter how powerful the oppressor, resistance is never, ever futile. So, who was this remarkable woman? How did a princess from a small kingdom become one of the greatest military leaders of her era? Let us dive deep into the extraordinary life of Queen Nzinga and uncover the story of the warrior queen who defied an empire. I'm so excited to share this piece of history with you. Let's journey back to 1583, to the kingdom of Ndongo, in what is now modern-day Angola. This is where our story begins, with the birth of a princess who would become a legend, Nzinga. Born to King Queen Nzinga grew up in a world on the brink of collapse. Her homeland faced a terrifying new threat, the Portuguese colonial empire. When the Portuguese first arrived in the late 1400s, they came as traders. But by the time Nzinga was born, their intentions had turned dark and sinister. They were no longer interested in gold or ivory. Their new commodity was human lives, destined for the brutal Atlantic slave trade. This was the world that shaped Nzinga, a world of constant conflict and encroaching danger. Unlike most princesses of her time, who were confined to the palace, Nzinga's education was radically different. She trained in combat right alongside her brothers. She mastered the arts of war, diplomacy, and how to rule a kingdom. Her father, the king, saw her brilliant mind and sharp intellect. He broke with tradition and invited her to sit on his military councils, a privilege unheard of for a woman at that time. From this unique position, Nzinga watched the Portuguese strategy unfold. She saw them build fortresses on her people's land, make promises only to break them, and expertly turn neighboring African kingdoms against one another. Their classic divide and conquer tactic was devastating. They armed rival groups, creating widespread chaos that made it easier to raid villages and capture people for slavery. She learned her enemies' methods from a young age. By the time Nzinga was a young woman, the kingdom of Ndongo was in a desperate fight for survival. The Portuguese, along with their local allies, were pushing deeper and deeper into their territory. After her father's death, Nzinga's brother, Ngola Mambandi, took the throne. But he was a weak and indecisive ruler, paralyzed by paranoia. His weakness only emboldened the Portuguese, and Ndongo's future looked bleak. Then, in 1622, the moment arrived that would change everything. King Mambandi, out of options and desperate for a truce, needed a masterful negotiator to face the Portuguese governor in the capital, Luanda. He couldn't do it himself, so he turned to the one person he knew had the strength and intelligence for the task: his sister, Nzinga. And this is where the story of the princess ends, and the legend of the queen truly begins. Picture this: a negotiation room in the early 1600s. On one side, the powerful Portuguese governor, sitting comfortably in the only chair. On the other, Nzinga, the ambassador from the kingdom of Ndongo, is expected to stand or sit on the floor. It's a power play, a deliberate insult designed to put her in her place. But Nzinga wasn't one to be put in her place. Without missing a beat, She signals to one of her servants. The servant immediately gets on all fours, becoming a human throne. Nzinga sits on her servant's back, now at eye level with the governor, and begins the negotiations as his equal. This wasn't just about pride. It was a masterclass in political theater. Nzinga knew that in the world of diplomacy, perception is everything. By refusing to be physically lowered, she was making a powerful statement. Ndongo is not a subordinate state. We are sovereign. We are equal. Her brilliance didn't stop there. During the talks, she used her sharp intellect to secure a treaty. The terms, the Portuguese would withdraw from Ndongo territory and officially recognize her brother's rule. To seal the deal and build trust with the Europeans, she even agreed to be baptized as a Christian, taking the name Ana de Souza. But this was all part of a much larger, long-term strategy. Her baptism wasn't about faith. It was about acquiring tools. She learned their language, their customs, and their religion, all to better understand her enemy and one day use their own weapons against them. She returned to her kingdom, a diplomatic victory in hand, only to face a devastating tragedy. Her brother, the king, died suddenly under very suspicious circumstances. Many historians believe Nzinga may have had a hand in his death, seeing him as a weak leader. While we may never know the full truth, what happened next is undisputed. Nzinga seized the throne, but there was a huge obstacle. Ndongo tradition forbade a woman from being the sole monarch. Did that stop her? Of course not. Nzinga's solution was as bold as it was brilliant. If she couldn't be queen, she would be king. She began dressing in men's clothing, especially when leading her armies. She insisted on being addressed with male titles, and even kept a large group of male concubines, completely flipping the gender roles of the time. This was her way of claiming absolute authority, leaving no room for anyone to question her right to rule. Meanwhile, the Portuguese proved just as ruthless. They tore up the treaty they had just signed and prepared to invade. The year is 1626. Portuguese forces have just shattered a peace treaty, invading the kingdom of Ndongo with overwhelming force. They have superior guns, trained European soldiers, and thousands of African allies from rival kingdoms. For Queen Nzinga, this is the fight of her life. She could have surrendered. She could have fled. Instead, she chose to become one of history's greatest guerrilla warfare commanders. Nzinga became a student of her enemy. She obsessively studied Portuguese military tactics, realizing their strength was on the open battlefield where firearms gave them a decisive edge. So, she simply refused to fight their way. Instead, Nzinga pioneered hit-and-run attacks, lightning-fast ambushes, and strategic retreats. She kept her forces constantly on the move, turning the dense, difficult terrain of the African interior into her greatest weapon. She choked off Portuguese supply lines, raided their isolated outposts, and made their occupation a costly, bloody nightmare. When the Portuguese finally pushed her out of Ndongo, did she give up? Not a chance. In 1631, she conquered the neighboring kingdom of Matamba, transforming it into a powerful new base for her resistance. Matamba became a beacon of hope, safe haven for escaped slaves, and a military powerhouse that the Portuguese simply could not ignore or eliminate. But Nzinga's genius wasn't limited to the battlefield. Her diplomatic skill was just as sharp. She forged a strategic alliance with the Dutch, who were Portugal's main rivals in the lucrative and brutal slave trade. When Dutch ships appeared off the coast of Luanda in 1641, Nzinga was ready, joining forces with them against their common enemy. She also allied with the fearsome Mbangala warriors, adopting and adapting their fierce military culture to her own ends. She even trained women to fight, creating a new kind of army where loyalty to her, their queen, was more important than any traditional gender roles. Portuguese commanders grew to fear her name. She wasn't a ruler who directed battles from the safety of a palace. Nzinga fought on the front lines, side by side with her warriors. Even in her 60s, she was reportedly still leading cavalry charges, weapon in hand. For 40 years, she fought. For 40 years, her kingdoms of Ndongo and Matamba stood as powerful symbols of resistance. She disrupted the slave trade, freed thousands from bondage, and proved to the world that an African state, led by a brilliant queen, could stand defiant against the tide of European colonization. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more incredible stories from history. By the 1650s, Nzinga was now in her 70s. Decades of relentless struggle had passed, and the world around her had shifted once again. The Dutch, her former allies, had been driven out of Luanda, and Portuguese power was starting to solidify in the region. Nzinga, ever the brilliant strategist, knew that endless war was no longer a viable path. The cost was becoming too great for her people and her kingdom. So, in 1656, she made a decision that was as pragmatic as it was powerful. She entered into peace negotiations with the Portuguese. This wasn't a surrender. Far from it. The treaty they signed recognized her as the legitimate, sovereign ruler of Matamba. She kept her throne, her kingdom, and her independence. While she hadn't completely expelled the Portuguese from the continent, she had achieved something that many thought was impossible. She had survived, and she had kept her people free. In her final years, Nzinga's focus shifted from warfare to nation-building. She turned Matamba into a stable and prosperous kingdom. She expertly managed trade routes, turning her nation into a commercial hub that could rival the Portuguese-controlled areas. She maintained complex diplomatic ties and, importantly, began to plan for a smooth succession, ensuring her kingdom would endure after she was gone. During this time, she also revisited her relationship with Christianity. She embraced it more fully, but always on her own terms, ingeniously blending its practices with traditional Mbundu spiritual beliefs. This created a unique cultural and religious identity for her kingdom, one that respected the past while adapting to the present. Queen Nzinga died peacefully in 1663, at the remarkable age of around 80. She had ruled for nearly 40 years, a lifetime of resistance, diplomacy, and leadership. Think about that. In an era of aggressive colonial expansion, she died a free queen in her own sovereign land, a fate that seemed unimaginable when she first stood up to the Portuguese governors decades earlier. Her legacy is immense. Nzinga became a powerful symbol of resistance against colonialism, an icon of African leadership and female empowerment. She proved that a ruler could be a fierce warrior, a shrewd diplomat, a devout leader, and a builder of nations all at once. Her story continues to inspire people all over the world. A timeless... Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the story of a leader who defied an empire, a queen who became a legend. The incredible Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba. Her life wasn't just a footnote in history. It was a masterclass in strategy, diplomacy, and unwavering resistance against the Portuguese colonial empire in 17th century Africa. So, who was this formidable queen? Born into the royal family of the Ndongo kingdom in what is now modern-day Angola, Nzinga was intelligent, charismatic, and a natural leader from a young age. She witnessed firsthand the devastating impact of the Portuguese slave trade and their relentless push to conquer her homeland. But instead of surrendering, she decided to fight back. Her journey began not on the battlefield, but at the negotiation table. In a now famous meeting in Luanda, Nzinga was sent by her brother, the king, to negotiate a peace treaty with the Portuguese governor. In a deliberate act of disrespect, the governor offered her only a cushion on the floor to sit, while he sat in a chair. In a legendary power move, Nzinga signaled to one of her servants, who knelt on all fours, creating a human throne for her to sit on eye to eye with the governor. This single act showed the Portuguese they weren't dealing with a subordinate, but an equal. She went on to negotiate a brilliant treaty, demonstrating a diplomatic skill that left the Europeans stunned. But peace was short-lived. Following her brother's death, Nzinga ascended to the throne, and the real war for her people's freedom began. For over 3 decades, Queen Nzinga led a fierce resistance against one of the most powerful empires in the world. She was a military genius, mastering guerrilla warfare tactics and forming strategic alliances. Even with the Portuguese's rivals, the Dutch, she led her armies from the front, riding into battle alongside her soldiers, inspiring them with her courage and unbreakable will. She transformed her kingdom of Matamba into a safe haven for runaway slaves and a powerful bastion against colonial expansion. Today, Queen Nzinga is a national hero in Angola. Her face appears on money, statues honor her memory, and schools teach her story as a symbol of resistance and pride. But her importance transcends one nation. Nzinga's life challenges the colonial narrative that Africans were passive victims of European expansion. She proved that African leaders could match and surpass European tacticians in military strategy and diplomatic cunning. She showed that resistance is possible even against overwhelming odds, that intelligence and adaptability can overcome superior technology, and that one determined leader can change the course of history. Queen Nzinga fought so that her people could live free. Her story reminds us that the fight for dignity, sovereignty, and justice is always worth waging, no matter how powerful the opposition. If this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more forgotten histories of remarkable leaders who changed the world. Drop a comment telling me which historical figure you want to learn about next. Until next time, remember, history belongs to those brave enough to make it.